Imagine finding a wallet stuffed with thousands of dollars sitting right in front of you on a store counter, with nobody watching. Would you keep it, or would you do the right thing? Most people like to think they'd be honest, but the truth is, you never really know until you're tested. This is the story of a millionaire named Daniel Westbrook who decided to test his employees in the most unexpected way by pretending to forget his wallet at the cash register. He wanted to know if the people working for him were truly trustworthy when they thought no one important was watching. What happened next didn't just reveal one person's character. It exposed a system of corruption that had been operating right under his nose for years. By the end of this story, you'll see how one act of honesty can change lives forever, and how one test can tear down an empire of lies. This isn't just about a forgotten wallet. It's about integrity, betrayal, and redemption. Buckle up, because this journey gets intense. Daniel Westbrook was a self-made millionaire who had built a chain of high-end electronics stores across the Midwest through decades of hard work and smart business decisions. He prided himself on creating a company culture based on trust, honesty, and treating customers with respect. Values his father had instilled in him growing up in a working-class family. Daniel remembered watching his father work honest labor jobs, never taking what wasn't his, even when they struggled to pay bills. Those lessons shaped Daniel's entire philosophy. Success without integrity was worthless, and money obtained dishonestly was poison to the soul. As his business grew to 23 locations and hundreds of employees, Daniel tried to maintain those values through rigorous hiring processes and regular ethics training. But lately, something felt wrong. Profits were declining at several locations, inventory discrepancies were increasing, and customer complaints about aggressive sales tactics and pricing irregularities had begun to pile up. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in his organization, people were betraying the trust he'd placed in them. The idea for the wallet test came to him unexpectedly during a conversation with his teenage daughter, Emma. She told him about a psychology experiment she'd learned about in school, where researchers left wallets in public places to see how many would be returned. "It's fascinating, Dad," she'd said with bright eyes. "Most people returned them when there was identification inside, because it made the owner feel real to them. But some people still kept the money, even when they knew whose it was." That conversation planted a seed in Daniel's mind that grew into an obsession over the following weeks. He realized he'd been managing his business from a distance, relying on reports, numbers, and manager recommendations, but he had no real sense of the character of the people on his front lines. He decided to conduct his own experiment, but with higher stakes and more personal investment. Daniel would visit his stores unannounced, dressed as an ordinary customer, and deliberately leave his wallet on the counter after making a purchase. Inside would be his real identification, several $1,000s in cash, and his business cards clearly identifying him as the owner of the company. Then he'd watch what happened next. Daniel began his undercover operation at his flagship store in downtown Chicago, a location he considered the crown jewel of his business empire. He dressed casually in jeans and a simple jacket, looking like any other middle-aged customer browsing for electronics. The store was busy that Saturday morning, filled with families shopping for laptops and teenagers examining the latest smartphones. Daniel selected an expensive camera and approached the checkout counter, where a young man named Travis worked the register. Travis was in his early 20s, with slicked-back hair and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Excellent choice, sir," Travis said smoothly, scanning the camera. "This model is very popular. Will you be needing an extended warranty today? It's highly recommended for equipment at this price point." Daniel declined politely, noting how Travis's smile tightened slightly at the rejection. The transaction was completed efficiently. Daniel paid with cash, collected his receipt, and then executed his plan. As he gathered his purchase, he deliberately left his wallet sitting on the counter, partially hidden behind the receipt printer. Then he walked away, his heart pounding with anticipation. Daniel positioned himself near the store exit, pretending to examine accessories while keeping the checkout counter in his peripheral vision. Within 30 seconds, Travis noticed the wallet. Daniel watched the young man's eyes light up as he picked it up and quickly glanced around to see if anyone was watching. Instead of calling out to Daniel, who was still clearly visible near the front of the store, Travis opened the wallet beneath the counter level. Daniel's stomach sank as he watched Travis's expression shift from curiosity to shock. He'd clearly seen the cash and identification. This was the moment of truth. Would Travis do the right thing or succumb to temptation? What happened next made Daniel's blood run cold. Travis quickly pocketed several bills from the wallet, then closed it and slipped it into his jacket pocket. No announcement over the store intercom, no attempt to chase down the customer who just left it there, no report to a manager. Just smooth, practiced theft that suggested this wasn't Travis's first time taking what wasn't his. Daniel felt a mixture of rage and disappointment wash over him, but he forced himself to remain calm and continue observing. Daniel left the store without confronting Travis, his mind reeling from what he'd witnessed. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, processing the betrayal and deciding his next move. He couldn't simply fire Travis based on this one incident. He needed to understand the scope of the problem and gather proper evidence. More importantly, he wanted to test other employees at other locations to see if this was an isolated incident or a systemic issue. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel repeated the wallet test at 7 different store locations across 3 states. The results were devastating. At 5 out of 7 stores, employees either pocketed the cash before turning in the wallet, kept the entire wallet without reporting it, or split the money with co-workers. Only at 2 locations did employees immediately announce the found wallet over the intercom or bring it directly to management. Daniel documented everything through careful observation and strategically placed calls to the stores afterward, asking if anyone had turned in a lost wallet. The pattern was clear. His company had a massive integrity problem that went far beyond one bad employee. The turning point came at his store in suburban Milwaukee, where something completely unexpected happened. Daniel executed his usual test, leaving his wallet at the register after purchasing a tablet. The clerk working that evening was a young woman named Maya Rodriguez, a college student working part-time to help pay her tuition. Maya was helping another customer when she noticed the wallet on the counter. Daniel watched from across the store as Maya immediately picked it up, opened it to check for identification, and her eyes went wide when she saw the owner's name and the substantial cash inside. But unlike the other employees Daniel had tested, Maya's reaction was completely different. She immediately called over her supervisor, a man named Rick, who Daniel recognized as a long-time manager at that location. Daniel moved closer, pretending to browse nearby electronics while carefully listening to their conversation. What he overheard would change everything. "Rick, someone left their wallet here," Maya said clearly, holding it out to her supervisor. "There's a lot of cash in it. And it belongs to—" She paused, her face confused. "It says Daniel Westbrook. Isn't that the owner's name?" Rick's expression shifted immediately, his relaxed demeanor becoming tense. "Give that to me," he said quietly, almost harshly. "I'll take care of it." But Maya hesitated, holding the wallet back slightly. "Shouldn't we call him immediately, or announce it over the intercom? The customer just left maybe 2 minutes ago. We could probably still catch him." Rick reached out more forcefully. "Maya, I said I'll handle it. This is management's responsibility, not yours. Just get back to your register." Something in Rick's tone made Maya's eyes narrow with suspicion. Daniel watched this exchange with intense interest, impressed by the young woman's instinct that something wasn't right. Maya slowly handed over the wallet, but Daniel could see she wasn't comfortable with the situation. Rick immediately walked toward the back office, moving quickly and glancing around nervously. Daniel's investigative instincts kicked into high gear. He recognized the behavior of someone about to do something wrong. Daniel made a split-second decision that would prove crucial. Instead of following Rick immediately, he approached Maya at her register. "Excuse me, miss," he said with a friendly smile. "I think I might have left my wallet here a few minutes ago. Brown leather. Has my business cards in it?" Maya's face brightened with relief. "Yes, a customer just left one. My supervisor took it to the back office. Let me call him for you." She reached for the phone, but Daniel stopped her gently. "Actually, before you do that, can I ask you something? Your supervisor seemed reluctant when you found it. Does that happen often? People finding lost items, I mean." Maya bit her lip, clearly torn between professionalism and honesty. Finally, she spoke quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "Between you and me, sir, there have been a few times when customers have called later looking for lost items that were supposedly never turned in. I've always wondered about that, but I'm just a part-time clerk. I figured maybe I was wrong to be suspicious." Daniel felt a surge of respect for this young woman's integrity and perceptiveness. "Thank you for being honest. I'm going to go collect my wallet now." Daniel walked purposefully toward the back office area, his calm exterior masking the anger building inside him. He pushed open the door without knocking and found Rick standing by a desk with the wallet open, in the process of removing the cash. Rick froze like a deer in headlights, his hand literally inside the wallet mid-theft. For a long moment, neither man spoke, the air thick with tension. Then Daniel said quietly, "I believe that's my property you're stealing, Rick." The color drained from Rick's face as recognition finally dawned. "Mr. Westbrook, I was going to secure the cash in the safe. I was protecting your money." The excuse was pathetically transparent. Daniel stepped forward, his voice cold as ice. "Really? By removing it from my wallet and putting it in your pocket? Because that's what it looked like you were about to do." Rick's mouth opened and closed helplessly, unable to form a coherent response. Daniel continued, "How long, Rick? How long have you been stealing from this company? How many lost items have you pocketed over the years? How many customers have called looking for their belongings only to be told nothing was turned in?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, each one hitting its mark with devastating accuracy. Rick's silence was answer enough, and Daniel could see the guilt written all over his face. But what happened next surprised even Daniel. Rick's expression suddenly shifted from panic to defiance. "You want to know the truth, Mr. Westbrook," Rick said, his voice taking on a bitter edge. "Yes, I've taken things. Cash from lost wallets, unclaimed electronics, store credit from returns. You know why? Because you pay us nothing. I've been managing this store for 8 years, dealing with impossible sales quotas and angry customers, and I barely make enough to cover my mortgage. Meanwhile, you're driving around in your Mercedes, living in your mansion, playing dress-up games to spy on your employees." The audacity of Rick, trying to justify his theft with complaints about salary, left Daniel momentarily speechless. Rick continued his rant. "Half the managers in this company do the same thing. It's practically expected. How else do you think we hit those profit targets you demand? We push warranties nobody needs. We pocket cash when we can. We adjust inventory numbers to cover shrinkage. It's survival, not theft." Daniel's anger transformed into something colder and more dangerous: determination. This wasn't just about one corrupt manager. This was about a systemic rot that had infected his entire organization. Daniel pulled out his phone and opened the voice recording app, which had been running in his pocket since he entered the office. "Everything you just said was recorded, Rick. Your confession, your claims about other managers, all of it. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you can expect to hear from my lawyers about criminal charges and restitution." Rick's defiance crumbled instantly, replaced by desperate pleading. "Wait, please. I have a family, a mortgage. I made a mistake. I'll pay back whatever you want." But Daniel was unmoved. "You didn't make a mistake, Rick. You made a choice. Repeatedly. Over years. And you just told me that other managers are doing the same thing, which means this problem is even bigger than I thought." Daniel called security and had Rick removed from the premises within 10 minutes, the man's protests echoing through the store and drawing stares from customers and employees alike. Once Rick was gone, Daniel stood alone in the office, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd discovered. If Rick was telling the truth about other managers being corrupt, then Daniel's entire company was built on a foundation of dishonesty. Everything he thought he'd created, a business based on integrity and trust, might have been an illusion. Daniel walked back out to the sales floor and approached Maya, who was watching the commotion with wide, worried eyes. "Maya Rodriguez, right?" Daniel said gently, and she nodded nervously. "I need to speak with you privately. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. Quite the opposite." He led her to a quiet corner of the store, away from curious onlookers. "Maya, what you did today, immediately reporting the wallet, questioning your supervisor when his behavior seemed wrong, that took courage and integrity. Those are rare qualities, especially in situations where doing the wrong thing would be easy and profitable." Maya looked confused. "I was just doing what anyone should do, Mr. Westbrook. It wasn't your wallet to take." Daniel smiled sadly. "You'd be surprised how many of your colleagues disagree with that philosophy. I've been testing employees across all my stores, and you're one of only a handful who passed without hesitation. I need people like you in leadership positions, people who won't compromise their values for money." He paused, then made a decision that would prove transformative. "How would you feel about a promotion to assistant manager with a salary that will more than cover your college tuition? I need honest people helping me rebuild this company's culture." Maya's eyes filled with tears, her hand covering her mouth in shock. "Are you serious? Mr. Westbrook, I'm just a part-time college student. I don't have management experience. I've only worked here for 6 months. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Experience can be taught, Maya. Character cannot. I'd rather train someone with integrity than try to reform someone who's already proven they can't be trusted. You have good instincts. You care about doing the right thing, and you questioned authority when you sensed something was wrong. Those are leadership qualities." He pulled out his business card and wrote a number on the back. "Think about it over the weekend. Call me Monday with your decision. But Maya, I want you to know something. What you did today changed the entire trajectory of this company. You reminded me that there are still good people working here, people worth fighting for." Oh. As Maya thanked him profusely, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wouldn't let the corrupt employees destroy what he'd built. Instead, he'd use this discovery to purge the rot and rebuild stronger, with people like Maya as the foundation. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel launched a comprehensive internal investigation with the help of a private security firm specializing in corporate fraud. They reviewed years of inventory records, transaction logs, security footage, and employee complaints that had been dismissed or ignored. What they uncovered was staggering in its scope and audacity. Rick had been right about one thing: the corruption was widespread. 14 managers across 11 store locations had been systematically stealing from the company through various schemes, pocketing cash from customer returns, taking unclaimed merchandise, manipulating warranty sales to skim commissions, and even working with external fences to sell stolen inventory. The total losses exceeded $3 million over a 5-year period, but the financial damage was only part of the story. The investigation also revealed a toxic culture where honest employees who questioned irregularities were either ignored, transferred, or forced out through hostile work environments. Several former employees came forward during the investigation with stories of being punished for refusing to participate in fraudulent sales tactics or reporting suspicious behavior by their supervisors. Daniel was horrified to discover that his company had become exactly the kind of corrupt organization he'd spent his life trying to avoid. The most painful discovery came when the investigation revealed that his own chief operating officer, a man named Gerald Pierce, who'd worked with Daniel for 15 years, had been aware of the corruption and actively covering it up. Gerald had been receiving kickbacks from corrupt managers in exchange for protecting them from scrutiny and manipulating audit results. When Daniel confronted Gerald in his office, the betrayal cut deeper than any of the others. 15 years, Gerald, Daniel said. his voice heavy with disappointment. "We built this company together. I trusted you like a brother. How could you do this?" Gerald had the decency to look ashamed, but his response was defensive. "You were always so idealistic, Daniel, living in your fantasy world where everyone does the right thing. I was dealing with reality, keeping the stores profitable, managing difficult employees, making the tough decisions you were too naive to make. Yes, I looked the other way sometimes, and yes, I took some money. But I kept this company running while you played the saint." Daniel stood up, his decision already made. "You're fired. Pack your things and be out by end of day. And Gerald, you'll be hearing from prosecutors. I'm not protecting anyone, including people I used to call friends." As the investigation progressed and terminations began, Daniel held a company-wide video conference with all remaining employees. The tension was palpable as hundreds of worried faces appeared on screens across multiple locations. Many feared they'd be fired simply by association. Others wondered if the entire company would collapse under the scandal. Daniel appeared on camera looking tired but determined, his voice steady as he addressed his employees. "By now, many of you have heard about the investigation and the terminations that have been taking place. I want to be transparent about what's happening and why. Over the past month, I discovered that corruption had infected multiple levels of our organization. Managers stealing from the company and customers, executives covering up fraud, and a culture where honesty was punished instead of rewarded." He paused, letting his words sink in. "This is not the company I built, and it's not the company we're going to be moving forward. I take full responsibility for allowing this situation to develop. I was too distant, too trusting, and too focused on expansion instead of integrity. That changes today. We're rebuilding this company on a foundation of transparency, honesty, and respect for our customers, our employees, and each other." Daniel continued his address, his passion building as he spoke. "I want to tell you about an employee named Maya Rodriguez, who works, or worked, until her recent promotion, as a part-time clerk at our Milwaukee location. When she found a wallet containing thousands of dollars, she didn't hesitate to do the right thing, even when her supervisor tried to handle it improperly. Maya's integrity in that moment exposed a corrupt manager and reminded me that there are extraordinary people working in this company who deserve better leadership." He saw Maya on one of the screens, tears streaming down her face, clearly overwhelmed by being publicly recognized. Maya represents the kind of employee we should be celebrating and promoting, people who refuse to compromise their values regardless of circumstances. Moving forward, our evaluation and promotion criteria will prioritize character and integrity above all else. I'd rather have a store managed by someone honest who's still learning than someone experienced who can't be trusted. Daniel then announced a new whistleblower protection program, increased employee oversight of management, and a complete overhaul of the company's compensation structure to remove incentives for fraudulent behavior. The response from honest employees was overwhelmingly positive, while those who'd been engaging in questionable practices quietly began updating their resumes. In the months following the purge, Daniel's company went through a painful but necessary transformation. 17 managers and 3 executives were terminated and faced criminal charges. Several pleaded guilty to fraud and theft charges, resulting in convictions and restitution orders. The negative publicity was intense. Local news covered the scandal extensively, and competitors tried to capitalize on the chaos by poaching customers and employees. Revenue dropped by 18% in the first quarter as the company struggled with leadership gaps and public relations damage. Industry analysts predicted the company wouldn't survive, suggesting that Daniel should sell while he still could. But something unexpected happened. Customers began returning specifically because of the changes. Word spread about Daniel's commitment to rooting out corruption and promoting honest employees. Customer reviews highlighted interactions with newly empowered staff members who focused on genuine customer service instead of aggressive sales tactics. Employees who had been considering leaving the company decided to stay, energized by the cultural transformation. Maya, now leading a team of assistant managers at multiple locations, became the face of the company's new direction, young, honest, and committed to doing business the right way. 1 year after the wallet test that started everything, Daniel stood in the renovated Milwaukee store for a celebration event. The location had become the model for the company's new approach. Transparent operations, employee-led integrity councils, and customer service standards that prioritized honesty over profit. Maya stood beside him, no longer a nervous college student, but a confident leader who'd earned the respect of everyone she worked with. She'd completed her degree with the company's support and had just been promoted to Regional Director of Operations, overseeing 12 stores. Daniel addressed the gathered employees and customers. "A year ago, I left my wallet on a counter as a test. I wanted to know if my employees were honest when they thought no one was watching. What I discovered was painful. But it also led me to exceptional people like Maya, who reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Today, I'm proud to say we're not just surviving, we're thriving as a company rebuilt on integrity." The room erupted in applause. Daniel smiled, feeling for the first time in years that his company truly reflected his values. The wallet test had cost him millions of dollars, long-time friendships, and nearly destroyed his business. But it had also saved his company's soul. But the story doesn't end with Daniel's triumph over corruption. In fact, the most challenging chapter was still ahead. 3 months after the celebration, Daniel received an anonymous email that would shake everything he'd rebuilt. The message was brief but chilling. "You think you caught everyone? Check the warehouse in Gary, Indiana. 3rd shift, you'll find your real problem." Daniel's first instinct was to dismiss it as a disgruntled former employee trying to cause trouble, but something about the specificity made him take it seriously. He contacted the head of his security team, a former FBI agent named Rebecca Walsh, who had led the initial investigation. "Rebecca, I need you to look into our Gary warehouse operation. Something doesn't feel right." Within 48 hours, Rebecca came back with preliminary findings that made Daniel's stomach drop. The warehouse showed inventory discrepancies that had been attributed to shipping errors and damaged goods, but the patterns suggested something far more sinister. Entire pallets of high-value electronics were disappearing, only to be written off as lost in transit or damaged beyond salvage. The estimated losses exceeded $200,000 monthly, going back at least 3 years. How had this escaped the investigation? Daniel and Rebecca decided to conduct a surprise inspection of the warehouse during the 3rd shift, the overnight operation from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., when most corporate oversight was minimal. They arrived at 2 in the morning, accompanied by 2 security officers, driving an unmarked vehicle to avoid tipping off anyone inside. The warehouse was massive, covering nearly 200,000 square feet of storage and distribution space. From outside, everything appeared normal. Trucks being loaded at the docks, forklifts moving through the aisles, workers in safety vests going about their business. But as Daniel and his team entered through the main office entrance using his master key, something immediately felt wrong. The overnight supervisor, a man named Eddie Caruso, wasn't at his desk in the main office where he should have been. The security logs showed only 3 workers checked in for the shift, yet Daniel could see at least 10 people moving around in the warehouse floor through the office windows. Rebecca pulled out her phone and began recording. "This is already irregular," she whispered to Daniel. "Let's see what we find." They walked onto the warehouse floor, and the activity immediately stopped. Workers froze mid-task, their faces showing clear alarm at the unexpected presence of the company owner. Daniel recognized none of them. These weren't his employees. Eddie Caruso emerged from behind a stack of pallets, his expression shifting rapidly from surprise to fear to forced casualness. "Mr. Westbrook, what brings you here at this hour? We weren't expecting any corporate visits." Daniel looked around slowly, taking in the scene. A truck backed up to a loading dock with its company logos covered by magnetic panels, dozens of unopened boxes of premium electronics stacked near the door, and several people in civilian clothes rather than company uniforms. "Eddie, who are all these people? They're not on the employee roster." Eddie's laugh was nervous and unconvincing. "Oh, these are temporary workers from the staffing agency. We've been short-handed, so I brought in some extra help for the overnight inventory movement. I have all the paperwork in the office." But Rebecca had already moved to the truck and was photographing the covered logos and license plate. "This truck isn't registered to this company or any of our contracted carriers," she announced loudly. "And those boxes are still sealed with our warehouse tape. They haven't been damaged or opened for inspection." The situation escalated quickly. One of the unidentified workers made a run for the exit, but Daniel's security team blocked his path. Eddie's face drained of color as he realized he'd been caught. "Eddie," Daniel said quietly, his voice hard as steel, "I'm going to ask you one question, and I strongly suggest you answer truthfully. How long has this been going on?" For a long moment, Eddie said nothing, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. 3 years, he admitted quietly. "It started small, just a few items here and there that I'd sell online. But then I met some guys who offered to buy larger quantities, no questions asked. They'd send their own crew, we'd load a truck, and I'd get 20% of the resale value. I adjusted the inventory system to cover the losses and forged damage reports to explain the shrinkage." Daniel felt sick. This was even worse than the store-level corruption. This was organized theft operating on an industrial scale. "How much, Eddie? How much have you stolen?" Eddie's voice was barely audible. "Total? Probably $7, maybe $8 million over 3 years. The number hit Daniel like a physical blow. Daniel immediately called the police, and within 30 minutes the warehouse was swarmed with squad cars and investigators. Eddie and 4 other warehouse workers who were complicit in the scheme were arrested on the spot. The unidentified temporary workers fled before police arrived, but the truck they'd been loading was impounded as evidence, containing over $300,000 worth of stolen electronics, ready for transport. As Daniel watched Eddie being led away in handcuffs, he couldn't help but feel a profound sense of failure. How had he let this happen? How had his company become a haven for thieves and criminals? Eddie had passed background checks, had solid references, and had worked for the company for 12 years. He'd been Employee of the Quarter twice. On paper, he'd been the perfect employee, but in reality, he'd been systematically robbing the company blind. The investigation that followed revealed that Eddie had been careful to spread the thefts across multiple inventory categories and timeframes, making patterns hard to detect. He'd also bribed 2 other supervisors to overlook irregularities and falsify inspection reports. The conspiracy was sophisticated and well hidden. The warehouse scandal broke publicly within days, and the media frenzy that followed was brutal. Headlines screamed about multi-million-dollar theft ring and corporate security failure. Competitors seized the opportunity to question Daniel's competence, with one rival CEO publicly stating, "If you can't protect your own inventory, how can customers trust you to deliver theirs?" Shareholders demanded answers at an emergency board meeting, with several calling for Daniel's resignation. The company's stock price, which had just started recovering from the earlier management purge, plummeted again. Some financial analysts declared the company effectively bankrupt, unable to survive 2 major scandals in the same year. Daniel's own family began questioning whether he should step down and sell the company while it still had value. But Daniel refused to quit. Standing before the board of directors, exhausted but defiant, he made his case. "Yes, we've discovered massive theft and corruption. Yes, we're facing serious financial losses and public relations disasters, but we're also doing something that most companies never do. We're actually rooting out the problems instead of hiding them. We're choosing transparency over cover-ups, integrity over expedience. That has to count for something." The board was split, but Daniel's largest supporter came from an unexpected source. Maya Rodriguez, who'd been invited to attend the board meeting as the newly appointed regional director, stood up to address the room. "With all due respect to everyone here, I was working at a cash register 1 year ago. Mr. Westbrook promoted me not because I had an MBA or connections, but because I did the right thing when it would have been easier to look the other way. That's the kind of leader he is, someone who values character over credentials." She turned to face the board members directly, her voice gaining strength. "Every person in this room knows that corporate theft is rampant across this industry. The difference is that most companies hide it, accept it as a cost of doing business, or only address it when they're forced to. Mr. Westbrook is actively hunting it down and eliminating it, even when it's painful and expensive. That's not leadership failure, that's leadership courage. If you force him out now, you're sending a message that integrity doesn't matter, that covering up problems is preferable to solving them." The room fell silent as Maya sat down. Several board members looked uncomfortable, perhaps realizing the truth in her words. The board ultimately voted to keep Daniel as CEO, but with conditions. He had to implement a comprehensive new security and oversight system within 90 days, recover at least 30% of the stolen assets through insurance and prosecution, and return the company to profitability within 18 months or face replacement. Daniel accepted the terms, knowing he had no choice. He immediately brought in one of the top corporate security consulting firms in the country to completely redesign the company's loss prevention systems. They implemented RFID tracking on all high-value inventory, AI-powered analytics to detect unusual patterns in inventory movement, mandatory dual signature verification for all large shipments, and unannounced random audits of all locations. More importantly, Daniel restructured the entire warehouse operation to eliminate the opportunity for isolated supervisors to operate without oversight. He also established an anonymous whistleblower hotline with substantial rewards for information leading to the discovery of fraud or theft. The message was clear. The days of easy theft were over, and honesty would be rewarded, while dishonesty would be aggressively prosecuted. As the new systems were implemented, something remarkable began happening. Employees started coming forward voluntarily to report irregularities and past misconduct. Some admitted to minor thefts years earlier, offering to make restitution. Others provided information about co-workers who were currently stealing. A warehouse worker in Phoenix reported a supervisor who was allowing friends to purchase returned merchandise at deep discounts. A store manager in Columbus admitted to manipulating commission structures to benefit certain employees. The whistleblower hotline received over 200 reports in the first month alone. Not all were legitimate. Some were false accusations driven by workplace grudges. But enough were credible that the company recovered an additional $400,000 in stolen merchandise and prevented ongoing theft schemes. The cultural shift was palpable. Employees began to believe that honesty was truly valued and protected, while dishonesty would be discovered and punished. The company's internal culture surveys, which had shown abysmal results during the corruption era, began showing dramatic improvements. Trust in leadership increased by 62% within 6 months. Employee retention of top performers improved significantly as good employees no longer felt forced to compete with colleagues who cheated the system. 18 months after the wallet test that started everything, Daniel's company had transformed completely. Financially, the recovery was slower than hoped. The company had recovered only 18% of stolen assets through insurance, prosecutions, and asset seizures. But the trajectory was positive. Revenue had returned to previous levels, and more importantly, profit margins were healthier than they'd been in years because theft-related losses had dropped by 87%. The company had earned industry recognition for its integrity-first approach, with several business ethics organizations featuring Daniel's story as a case study in corporate transformation. But the real victory was in the people. Maya Rodriguez had been promoted again to Vice President of Operations, becoming the youngest executive in the company's history. She'd built a team of leaders who all shared her commitment to doing business the right way. The employee who'd sent the anonymous tip about the warehouse turned out to be a third-shift inventory clerk named Marcus, who Daniel personally thanked and promoted for his courage. Throughout the organization, honest employees who'd been overlooked or held back during the corrupt era were finally getting opportunities to advance and lead. Daniel's company wasn't perfect. No organization ever is. But it was built on a foundation of integrity that couldn't be shaken. 2 years after the wallet test, Daniel received an invitation that validated everything he'd fought for. A request to speak at the National Retail Leadership Conference about corporate ethics and cultural transformation. Standing before an audience of over 3,000 business leaders from across the country, Daniel felt a mixture of pride and humility. He began his speech with the story of leaving his wallet on a counter as a test, watching the audience lean forward with interest. "I thought I was testing one employee's honesty," Daniel told them. "Instead, I discovered that my entire company had been corrupted from within, and I'd been too distant and too trusting to notice. That wallet contained $3,000 in cash and my business card identifying me as the owner. Out of the first 7 employees I tested, only 2 did the right thing immediately and without hesitation. One of those employees was a part-time college student named Maya Rodriguez, who's now our Vice President of Operations and sitting in this audience today." The crowd applauded as Maya stood and waved, clearly embarrassed but glowing with pride. Daniel continued, "The lesson I learned wasn't just about catching thieves. It was about understanding that company culture isn't created by mission statements and training programs. It's created by what you actually reward and what you actually punish every single day." Daniel's speech resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom approached him afterward with their own stories of discovering corruption in their organizations. But one conversation stood out. A young woman named Jennifer Kim, who managed a chain of jewelry stores, pulled Daniel aside with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Westbrook, I need your advice. I suspect one of my store managers is stealing, but he's my uncle and my father's business partner. If I expose him, it could destroy my family. But if I don't, I'm betraying everything I believe in. What would you do?" Daniel looked at this young woman who reminded him so much of Maya 2 years earlier, someone struggling to do the right thing despite enormous personal cost. "Jennifer, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I learned. When you compromise your integrity to protect someone else's dishonesty, you become complicit in their corruption. Your uncle made his choices. You're not responsible for the consequences he faces. He is. The question you need to ask yourself is, what kind of leader do you want to be?" Jennifer nodded slowly, processing his words. 3 months later, she sent Daniel an email. Her uncle had been fired and prosecuted, her father was furious with her, but her company was stronger and she could finally sleep at night. "Thank you for giving me the courage," she wrote. The ripple effects of Daniel's story continued spreading in unexpected ways. A business school professor contacted him about developing a case study for MBA students about ethical decision-making in crisis situations. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell the story of the company's transformation. Multiple organizations invited Maya to speak about her journey from part-time clerk to executive vice president, inspiring countless young professionals who felt stuck in their careers. But perhaps the most meaningful impact came from Daniel's own employees, who began sharing how the company's transformation had changed their personal lives. One longtime employee named Robert wrote an emotional letter to Daniel, explaining that watching the company embrace integrity had inspired him to address his own gambling addiction. He'd been stealing small amounts from petty cash to fund his habit, but the cultural shift made him realize he needed help rather than better hiding techniques. He'd entered treatment, made restitution, and was now celebrating 1 year of sobriety. "You didn't just save this company," Robert wrote. "You saved my life and my family." Stories like Robert's reminded Daniel that business decisions have profound human consequences, both positive and negative. On the second anniversary of the wallet test, Daniel organized a company-wide event he called Integrity Day, a celebration of the employees who exemplified the company's values and a remembrance of how close they'd come to losing everything. Every store location held events featuring employee recognition, customer appreciation activities, and community service projects. Daniel visited the Milwaukee store where it all began, now a flagship location that had become a training center for new managers. He stood at the same counter where Maya had found his wallet 2 years earlier, and the moment felt surreal. So much had changed, yet the fundamentals remained the same. A customer approached him, recognizing him from media coverage. "Mr. Westbrook, I just want to say thank you. I've been shopping at your stores for years, but they're different now. The employees actually care about helping people instead of just making sales. Whatever you did to turn things around, it worked." Daniel smiled, thanking the customer, but in his heart he knew the credit belonged to people like Maya, Marcus, and the hundreds of employees who chose integrity even when it was difficult. He'd simply created an environment where their natural goodness could flourish instead of being suppressed. As Daniel drove home that evening, he reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple test, leaving his wallet on a counter to see what would happen. That decision had cost him millions of dollars, exposed massive corruption, nearly destroyed his company, damaged important relationships, and forced him to confront painful truths about his own leadership failures. But it had also led him to extraordinary people like Maya, who reminded him why integrity matters. It had given him the opportunity to build something real and lasting, not just profitable. His daughter Emma, now in college studying business ethics, had told him recently, "Dad, you're my hero. Not because you're rich or successful, but because you were willing to lose everything to do the right thing. That's the kind of leader I want to be someday." Those words meant more to Daniel than any financial success ever could. The wallet test had changed everything, not just for his company, but for everyone touched by the ripple effects of choosing integrity over convenience. As he pulled into his driveway, Daniel made a mental note to leave his wallet on a counter again soon. Not as a test this time, but as a reminder that in a world where dishonesty is common, choosing to do the right thing is always extraordinary. And that extraordinary choice, made by ordinary people every single day, is what changes the world one honest act at a time.